Hi everybody, Steph from Stellium Astrology here. I am attaching this little voice note onto this episode purely because I had already recorded it and have since decided on a date that I want to relaunch the Stellium Astrology podcast on YouTube. So I have elected the 15th of June, which looks to be a rather auspicious date for a relaunch. And as that date is fast approaching, I just wanted to give you guys the heads up so that you could perhaps keep your eyes peeled, keep your ears peeled, and sign up to my YouTube channel, subscribe, and also hit the bell if you don't mind. Subscribers will get put into a draw where I will be entering you into a lucky dip. Someone will win a Honeycomb Collective Diary, which is a personal astrological almanac. I've got one and it's gorgeous. You can, I'm not affiliated with the people that make this diary. However, I will pay for one of my lucky YouTube subscribers and listeners to have one of these diaries created to their specific requirements, their specifications, and hopefully you'll enjoy playing with this gorgeous diary, which is a personal insight to the astrological transits of each month. And somebody else will be in the draw for a reading with me. Obviously not too soon, but when I do open up my readings again, one of the runner-up prize, or whoever wants what. So I will let the first person out the hat choose which prize they want, and the second person out the hat will get the unwanted prize. So that's basically it. I just wanted to let you guys know. So 15th of June is the date that I have decided upon as being my elected launch date, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. Hi everybody, welcome back to the Stellium Astrology podcast. I am Stephanie James, your host, and I am also the founder of StelliumAstrology.com. I'm a published writer. I used to do horoscopes for Elle Magazine UK, as well as some online magazines and other ones in print. I'm a tutor at the London School of Astrology. I've just created a series of classes on Black Moon Lilith for the London School of Astrology in China. And I am currently recording a series of episodes for you guys on the aspects. We've done the conjunction, we've done the opposition. Today we're doing a square. So let's have a wee butchers. I hope you guys are okay anyway. I hope you've been all right. I'm just having a productive few days, getting a lot of things done, ticking a lot of boxes, and just basically getting my stuff together, and organising my life for the impending arrival of my little baby boy, who I keep dreaming about, and I'm looking forward to meeting him. Can't wait to give him a cuddle, can't wait to give him a squeeze, and I'm really excited because I'm going to be a cloth bum mum, which means I'm going to be a mum who uses reusable diapers, reusable nappies. And they're really cute. I've gone for Bambino Mio, and I've ordered a bunch, and they are going to be arriving tomorrow. So I'm excited to see these little nappies. And there's different types. I've gone for there's different ones that you buy, and the terry cloth that goes inside. In the one that I bought is attached, but I think I'm going to probably cut it out. Kind of goes against it. I think I'm going to cut it out, and then I can just put loads of different terry cloths in if I want to. Either way, I've been really excited about the cloth bum mum thing. I really hope it works for me. I really hope it works for the baby, but who knows? We don't know. We'll see what happens, but you've got to take the plunge and just invest and hope for the best, don't you, sometimes? So anyway, let's get on with the aspects. Now, I have already, like I mentioned, I've already covered the conjunction and the opposition. The The conjunction being a major aspect and a major neutral aspect according to this grid in Sue Tompkins' Contemporary Astrologer's Handbook. I'm currently on page 219. And so the opposition, the conjunction is a major neutral being that it's not a hard aspect. It's neutral in the sense that when the planets are in conjunction, they tend to just work together. So they resonate. They kind of, as I kind of described before, I think Sue Tompkins describes it in one of her books. It's like ringing a bell, and however close they are together will be how in sync with each other the bell rings. So if they're at the same degree, it's going to be, you couldn't tell the difference between the two. If they were 8 degrees apart, there'd be a bit of a delay in one compared to the other. And then when we got the opposition, it's kind of like invites the idea of a relationship. And it's a bit of a tug of war or a seesaw. And this is considered to be a hard and active aspect, and a major one at that. We have other major aspects, the square being one, also the trine and the sextile, all considered to be the major aspects. We will be covering those, and today we are doing the square as mentioned, and this is another hard active aspect, usually in a chart, usually in a reading. If you're looking for challenge, if you're looking for experiences which will bring somebody out of themselves, in various different ways, it's usually the hard aspects that will do that, will be much more noticeable. And with the square, the saying that I like to use with the square, perhaps with the opposition you could as well, is the squeakiest wheel gets oiled first. And that with the square tends to be that it's very hard to ignore. You can't really, and the thing about a square in a natal chart as well is that it doesn't usually involve other people. Usually the square is an internalized conflict, a challenge which we have to kind of constantly address, because it's not necessarily something that, like with the opposition, involves another person, so we can deal with that through our interactions, and whether or not we want to. The square is almost a self-imposed challenge. It can be, anyway. Sometimes we can meet people that represent the square, but it might not be that they're directly challenging us, but there may be an aspect of their personality or their presence which triggers something within us. So they leave us feeling ruffled, and it might not be through any cause or action of their own, but it triggers a process within which requires addressing. And we may go away feeling vexed or, a little bit disturbed because we need to focus on this challenging aspect. Now, it's interesting because people look at hard aspects and think it means it's hard, or they think that it's going to be challenging, and they are described as challenging in a sense. But actually, the square is it's an action aspect, and it's very noticeable to us, and it creates a sense of friction, which means that you have to address it. It's very conscious. There are other aspects in the chart, we will talk about it next week, like the trine, which is not as conscious, and it can pass us by without us really even being aware or conscious of these things that we have a harmonious relationship with. The square is definitely a less harmonious aspect. It's not very harmonious at all, but through the challenge it requires commitment, development, and ultimately a sense of mastery in a way. What we can look at here is, if you remember back to when we did the episodes on the modes, so the quadruplicities, the modes or quadruplicities are the signs of the zodiac which are related by their mode. So the modes being cardinal, mutable, or fixed signs. So the related modes are, for example, the cardinal signs Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, those also tying in with the solstices and equinoxes. And then you've got Taurus, Leo, Scorpio and Aquarius being the fixed signs, and then you have Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius and Pisces being the mutable signs. So those signs are of the same mode, and the reason for that being that they are different elements, but they are related by whether or not they are fixed or cardinal or mutable, being different ways of dealing with conflict or challenge. This can be identified by looking for signs or planets which happen to be 90 degrees apart. So going back to those episodes that I did before, I said sticking a square on top of the zodiac wheel, a square, an equal-sided square, an equilateral, quadrilateral. If you put that on top of the wheel of the zodiac, the wheel of the horoscope, then each corner of the square will be in at the same degree in each sign of the same mode, 90 degrees apart. So as we know, an equilateral square or a quadrilateral has 4 corners, and each of those corners will be 90 degrees each, adding up to 360. So that's this is how we identify this. So to find the squares in the chart, we have to divide the circle by 4. So before, when we had the conjunction, dividing the circle by 0, well then that's just 360 degrees. The opposition, dividing it by 2, is 180 degrees times 2. And then we have, with the squares, we have dividing the circle by 4, 90 degrees times 4. So don't worry about numbers, don't worry about maths if it's not your strong subject. It's not mine either. The only reason I can do any of this stuff is because I'm a visual person, so when I look at it through astrology, then I can see it. Otherwise, it doesn't work for me. But yeah, so the square, when you're looking at the glyph for the square, it's very simple. It is a square. So if you're looking on astro.com at the little grid down the bottom, and when you're looking at your own chart and you want to see the planets that are square to each other in that little grid, anything that's got a little square in it means that each of those planets that line up with that particular square in the grid means they're square to each other. So they're quite easy to identify. As said, they're 90 degrees apart, and the orb we're working with, so for all of the hard major aspects, we are going for 8-degree orb. So 8 degrees for the conjunction, the opposition and the square. And like I said, the orb is orbit. It's I think it's the orbit of longitude, I believe, or the orbits of I think it's the orbits of longitude, I believe. But yeah, just think of it as how many degrees apart the planets happen to be. So if you had Mars at 1 degree and your moon at 4 degrees, then that's a 3-degree orb. So with the square, it's definitely not as free-flowing, and when I say harmonious, it's not as easy. And yes, I think challenge definitely is implied with the square. Now, I think that the square is almost a sense of restlessness, and if you're somebody with a, I think I saw on somebody in the Stellium astrology community on Facebook said something about people who have a lot of squares in their chart are damaged. Like, to start with, we're all damaged. We've all got experiences that have caused us to have like our own personal traumas and challenges in life and difficulties which have forced us into being cautious or over friendly. We all have our own things that we've had to deal with. Just having lots of squares in the chart doesn't imply that about somebody. What the squares imply is a friction between the planets which force recognition, and ultimately they force us to adapt in a way that best expresses these planets, at least highlights our attention and awareness to these things. I'm going to speak about myself. I do have a few squares in my chart actually. I have a Moon Mars square, And that's a difficult one, because if you have a moon Mars square, it's anything that kind of feeds into the moon requires daily expression, and it can make you a bit of a hothead, which I am. I'm sad to say, quite hot-headed. I can get frustrated quite easily. I'm the type of person that probably needs to burn off a bit of energy every day. With that Mars, it needs to be expressed, and if it doesn't get expressed through exercise or doing something I'm passionate about, I end up getting a bit stressed out and frustrated, and snappy, and grumpy. I also have Venus and Mercury in conjunction, 1 degree orb, and they are so they're working together in hand, sweet talking Mercury and Venus together. So Venus makes Mercury a lot more diplomatic, a lot more diplomatic. And they're square my Pluto and Saturn conjunction, which is a bit wider. I have Pluto at 29 Libra, and I have Saturn, I think, at 3, I can't remember now if it's 3 or 4 Scorpio, so about 3 or 4 degrees of orb there between that conjunction. But Saturn happens to line up very tight with my Mercury and Venus conjunction, so that Saturn Pluto works hand in hand, and so does that Venus Mercury. So you could say it's like somebody who loves to have a chat, loves to go out and talk and socialise, somebody who likes to express their ideas in a creative visual way, in an aesthetically pleasing way, so like that Mercury Venus conjunction. And then you could go down to that Saturn Pluto, and there could be issues of authority there. It could be that Saturn doesn't particularly, Saturn is the authority, and Pluto is a kind of a bit of a corrupter, and it could be a conspiratorial kind of difficulty. I have noticed that there does tend to be that, and you do, when you become aware of these kind of things like these conjunctions and how planets work together, when you start seeing yourself really working with them, you can see how they kind of fuse together. It can be hard to tell where one finishes and the other one begins. But when it comes to the square, there's this very lovely, light and sweet and friendly and sociable Mercury and Venus conjunction, and then this very dark and difficult Saturn-Pluto conjunction squaring the other two. So it requires a lot of there's a lot of attention and focus which needs to be addressed to this square that I have in my chart, particularly with the Saturn. I would say the Saturn-Mercury square often describes somebody who doesn't have great confidence, and can be kind of imposter syndrome. And you can look at a Saturn-Venus square as somebody with low self-esteem. I have to say that both of those things are true about myself. I don't know if I've got necessarily low self-esteem anymore. I've worked on it a lot, but definitely I did used to, extremely low self-esteem. And then, like with the imposter syndrome, I think that if you suffer from imposter syndrome, you'll always suffer from it. I think you'll always feel like you're not good enough in some way or another in that respect, not knowledgeable enough. But it's almost like personally, like I had experiences when I was younger which triggered that within myself, and it's something that then I reiterate it to myself, as opposed to constantly meeting people that enforce that upon me. It's something that I constantly reiterate to myself. It's my internal monologue telling me to doubt myself and not to trust that I know what I know, that kind of thing. Anybody here listening who's got a Saturn Mercury square is probably relating right now. But yeah, so it's very interesting how the squares work, because they can be triggered through an experience, but that experience can then stay with you and you can end up doubting yourself. The great thing about squares is they require constant attention, and when you require something requires constant attention, it forces you to master that area of your life. I was told by an English teacher, that I had a wild imagination and that it was ridiculous and crazy. Maybe this is a good example of my Mercury-Venus conjunction and my Saturn-Pluto conjunction in square to each other, but I wrote a story when I was at school. We had to write about something to do with forbidden Against All Odds. It was called Against All Odds, and it was really weird, and I don't know where I got the idea to write about it. But I wrote a story about a brother and sister that had never met before, and they fell in love. And the main character, the female, was Alanis, and the main character in it that was the male character was Mark. I think it was Mark Owen or Mark Gallagher. I can't remember, but it was all pop stars and stuff. And and so I wrote this story about how they met and how they fell in love, and and it was like this forbidden taboo, which if you think about like Pluto square Venus Mercury, that's like writing about romantic taboos. And it was a very strange thing for me to have submit, but I thought, well, that's a forbidden kind of against all odds story. And the teacher didn't accept the essay. Fair enough, I suppose. But I was told that I would never really amount to much. I was a dreamer. I wasn't very good. And I do often think about the things that my English teacher used to say to me, and I now think to myself, gosh, millions of people have read my horoscopes. Millions. Like millions. I can't even remember what statistic I was looking at for how many people buy Elle magazine in the UK. But I was just like, I don't even know if she's ever been published before, but I can't imagine that there's been more people read her work than has read mine. And I'm not saying that I'm this great literary genius. I just know I achieved something that probably she never would. And I don't mean that in a horrible way towards her. It's just highly unlikely. And the thing is, I never quit. And the reason I didn't quit is because I have that square. I always push myself. I'm always wanting to join courses. I want to push myself to learn more. And even it's the problem with the square is it's like I said, it's restless. I can't ever seem to stop wanting to push myself. Even when I'm resting, I'm thinking about things I could be or should be doing. And you can say that that's the curse of the modern existence, because none of us can really switch off, and we've always got something going on. And the older you get and the more you've got going on, the more you have to juggle. I get that. There is that aspect, but there are some people who are able to switch off, and there are some people that aren't. And I would say that the square is an aspect that's constantly switched on. It's like a kind of constantly incoming. It's really hard to ignore, and you end up feeling extremely challenged to keep pushing, basically. So it's a bit like a tug of war. It's a little bit like a tug of war in your own mind, or it's a kind of an inner conflict, which is a psychological conflict of your own to deal with. So when you've got squares in the natal chart, they can express themselves in various ways. When you've got a planet squaring one of your natal placements, it again presents a challenge for you to have to work through. And it will also show you whether or not you really want something, because you're either going to push really hard for it, or you're going to just say, well, I can't do it. So, for example, when I had Uranus square my Mercury, that transit started happening, gosh, I don't even know now. It must have started happening in about 2019, 2018, 2019. Because Uranus entered Taurus, so I've got my Mercury at 2 degrees of Aquarius. So when that started happening, I started coming up with new ideas about how I could express myself through astrology and reach my community. Which, what am I doing right now? I'm sitting here talking into a podcasting microphone, recording an episode for you guys on Square, reminiscing about the time Uranus squared my Mercury, which is where this podcast idea was born. I mean, I'd already sort of thought about it, but it started to really take on a form of its own. I was awakened to the real potential of it. So squares don't have to be bad. They just have to be something that forces you to think outside the box. Particularly with a Uranus-Mercury square, you could say that definitely is think outside the box. It's very literal sometimes. Maybe the square is the box. Sometimes when this inner conflict occurs, this box that we've put ourselves in, that we could quite comfortably sit and never evolve, we could never progress, we could never develop ourselves, we could quite comfortably enjoy a life of eventlessness, and just coasting and just being chilled, which sounds like the dream to me, like the absolute dream. But we would stagnate. The challenge keeps us alive. Challenge is the fire that keeps us burning. And you know, there's a sense of retirement about not wanting to engage with challenge. And often, if you meet people that, it's like a grim thing to say, but there you go, here comes my Saturn Pluto square my Mercury again. You know, when people retire, they often, if they don't have hobbies and they don't have things to you know, to challenge themselves or to enjoy and indulge in, then they tend to you know, they can die early, they can get ill, and they can, you know, it's almost like they give up. And the square is not about giving up. The square is about taking a challenge and facing it head on. And this challenge is not necessarily imposed by anybody other than ourselves. So you can almost see the square as the trigger for an evolutionary step to developing the self. So actually, if we think about the moon phases, because I've been likening these aspects to the moon phases, and this is the last one that I suppose would really properly link in really with the idea, because most of us work with the new moon, the full moon, and the first and final quarter moons. However, with the square, the moon and the sun, or the moon is square the sun twice every month, or twice every cycle. So we have the conjunction of the sun and the moon, and then we have the moon moving to the 90-degree angle, and that's the first square, or the first quarter moon. And then we have the sun and moon opposition, which is when the sun and moon are 180 degrees apart. That's the full moon, where the moon is directly opposite the sun, and we can see the light of the sun reflected from the moon, and so we can see her in all of her glory. And then we go back down, the moon then moves again back to another 90-degree angle to the sun, or 90-degree aspect. And then we've got the third quarter moon, the closing quarter, where we see half of the moon again, just like we did on the opening quarter. And then when the moon moves back down towards the conjunction again, back down to the 0 degrees of separation, we have the new moon, the end of that cycle, and the beginning of a new one. So if you can imagine that, if we got a hot cross bun, if we draw a big circle with a cross in the middle, then you could start with sun and moon together, and then you can draw the moon, so literally draw the sun and moon together on the left side, and then you can do at the bottom, the moon will be the first quarter moon at the bottom of the circle on the cross, and then on the opposite side of the sun and moon together, you've got the moon in the opposition, which is the full moon, and then you get to the top, which is the final quarter, the half moon again. And the half moons, the final quarter, or the first quarter, are times of challenge. So you can almost see it like the first square of the moon is the hatching or the sprouting, for example. So say you've planted a seed in the first phase, which is the new moon. The way that when the moon is working up to the first quarter, you're watering that soil, and then at the first quarter you're starting to see the seeds developing. And with how it works usually is you find that there are challenges that need to be addressed. So for example, you could say that the idea that you've sown at the new moon, as it's coming to the first quarter, it could be that you're starting to see that this idea has potential, but you need to know how it's going to fit into your life, and you suddenly have to sort of like rejig your diary a little bit so that it doesn't take up all of your time. By the time that the moon gets to the full moon position, so the opposition, this is where we see it in its full glory. So do you remember that analogy when we're sitting at the table and we can see the person opposite us? That is, you can see them in their entirety, essentially. And that's the same with this idea. So it could be, say you decided you were going to do a new service you were going to offer, and you were going to offer half price tarot readings, and you put it on your website and you advertise it on your social media, and suddenly by the first quarter you start to get a lot of people taking you up on that offer, and you think, oh gosh, I didn't really think it was going to be that successful. So you have to deal with the challenges that arise there and put in some contingencies in order to soften the blow, because it's a bit like maybe limit the amount of appointments you do each week. And then by the full moon position, you are perhaps in a position where you are able to take on more clients, drop a few days at work, and it's a thriving thing that you've really proud of. It's in full fruition. And then as we go to the final quarter moon, you have this sense of new challenges arising from this new thing, because with every solution there comes new problems. You buy a new pair of trainers because your old ones are knackered. That's a solution. New problem, you've got a blister. So what's the solution? You've got to get some plasters. You buy some plasters. It works for a little while, then you realise you're allergic to the plaster. There's always going to be, kind of a silly thing, but there's always going to be like a new problem arising from a solution. It's just the nature of everything in life. So you have to think about these squares as issues arising which force us to think about how to create solutions. And in the same way, in the natal chart, we have squares which force us to, I think they really force us to constantly improve. I really do. And sometimes they can be difficult, and sometimes they can be really useful, and we're able to really work in a positive way with them. So I picked out two charts. In fact, I picked out three. I've picked out, who have I got here? Somebody, I won't stick long on the celebrity chart. I decided to look at Marilyn Manson. Can't remember his name. It's Brian something or other. But yeah, I picked Marilyn Manson because he's somebody that I was looking at with my Lilith charts, because he's got Lilith square Pluto. But I'm not looking at that today. What I'm looking at is that he has got a Mercury-Mars square. Oh, look at that, would you? He's got Mercury at 2 degrees Aquarius, just like me. And he has Mars at 4 degrees of Scorpio, which is about the same degree as my Saturn. How strange. Didn't do that on purpose. So actually, he's got another square as well. He's got a Sun-Saturn square as well. Interesting. So what we have with him is somebody, if we think about it, his ability to, he triggers people with the things that he says, the music that he writes. I know there's some controversy around his behaviour. I think he's been outed as a bit of a sexual predator, but I haven't looked into it in great detail. However, I just thought I'd pick his chart because Mars in Scorpio is very submarine-like. It's a bit of a torpedo. It doesn't particularly make itself known, and it's usually quite good at controlling its anger. Usually channels its aggressive tendencies or its frustrations it puts them on ice. It's kind of like the revenge is a dish best served cold in Scorpio. If you think about Scorpio as being the iceberg, if you put a bit of Mars down there, it can be, I'll put that on ice and just wait. But Mercury in Aquarius is a bit of conflict there, because Mercury in Aquarius is quite outspoken and opinionated, quite frankly, usually, and is able to, it's kind of a voice of the people, kind of like wants to address the people, that kind of community Aquarian vibe, whereas Mars in Scorpio is quite private. And especially as a masculine archetype for Marilyn Manson, as a young man, he probably identified with Mars in Scorpio quite a bit. He probably still does, because he is that quirky, unique individual, and he likes to dance with a bit of taboo, dicing and dancing with the devil, I guess. He's definitely not your typical conventional. He looks a bit scary. He just looks a bit scary. And one of the things he said, and I can't remember if I'm quoting him exactly, so don't quote me quoting him, but he said something about, people talk about freedom, people talk about, America being a country, a free country where we should be able to do what we want, express ourselves. He says, But the second you go out dressed the way that I do, the second that you go out looking this way, you ruffle feathers and people don't want you to be that person. But what you're doing is essentially exercising this right of freedom of speech or freedom of expression. He said, I'm not hurting anybody dressing the way that I do. I'm not hurting anybody singing about the things I sing about. However, people don't like it because they preach freedom, but they don't necessarily truly believe in it. And I liked it because he kind of, and I really wish I could remember where I heard him saying this and what it was kind of, I just can't really remember where I heard it. But what I liked was that it was just really true. What he said, it was just very true. I just couldn't help but feel that there was a real sense of hypocrisy that he was addressing. But the problem is he dresses that way because he knows it's controversial and attention seeking to an extent. He's got a Leo ascendant, by the way, and a moon in Leo. But yeah, he's a very, dresses in a sort of provocative way that is going to ruffle feathers. And at the same time, he speaks about it in a very logical way. He's not typical of what you'd expect of somebody who could speak so philosophically, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, I don't really know the ins and outs of the controversy around him at the moment, but I happen to like a couple of his songs, and I kind of respect his kind of what he's doing in a sense, because I respect that kind of being different, daring to be different and ruffling feathers because he's making a point. I mean, he even chose a name which was like, Marilyn, something beautiful and something scary. So he chose Marilyn Manson because Marilyn Monroe was so beautiful, and then obviously Charles Manson was such a horror. But yeah, he's also got a Venus in Pisces and Neptune in Scorpio. So yes, they're both in water signs, but we've got Venus at 1 Pisces and Neptune at 27 Scorpio. So if Venus moves, if Venus was back just a few degrees and in Aquarius, they would have been an exact square. But yes, he's got Venus. So how far apart is this? 27, 28, 29, 31. So yeah, about 4 degrees apart. Some people can just do that in their head, but I have to count. If you're wondering, I'm not trying to patronise you guys. That's literally how I do it. So yeah, he's got a Venus Neptune square, which is difficult. Those two planets working together are generally quite difficult because they struggle with reality, which is interesting but they're also very creative, by the way. But then also he is a Capricorn, which is a reality-based sign, and his sun in Capricorn is squared by Saturn in Aries. So there's this kind of Venus, Neptune, unboundaried, romantic, creative, perhaps a little bit, I don't know, likes to embellish the truth. And, if we're going to think about the controversy around him, perhaps there's a sense of overstepping boundaries. And then that Sun-Saturn square, which is, again, challenging him with boundaries. I think with the Moon-Saturn square, Liz Green says that people with that aspect are the architects of their own isolation, which is interesting. But yes, a Sun-Saturn square could be somebody who dresses in a way that forces people to step back because they don't want to get too close to him because he does look so weird. It's like you think, oh, I don't want to get near to them. I don't really want to get to know them. Why would they dress like that? And that's not my personal thoughts, by the way. I think that's just what he's doing. And then that Mars-Mercury square, which is somebody who can provoke without necessarily actually verbally provoking, and then rationalise the provocation, the results of provocation, and highlight the social message encoded within that. Yeah, it's a bunch of interesting squares. And squares, like I said, tend to be aspects of constant improvement. So that is the celebrity chart that I thought I would look at. And I have picked Sarah, our listener Sarah, who I did look at her chart earlier and mention a Mars at 1 degree Gemini and Moon at 4 degrees of Virgo. I chose that aspect because it's a Moon Mars square. So again, like I said, it's like requires daily expression when it feeds into the moon. It requires, it's also Mercury ruled, Mercury and Gemini. So you might want to look at Mercury and see what Mercury's saying in the chart. And Mercury happens to be in Capricorn, in an Earth sign, and speaking in a comfortable aspect towards the moon. So there may be a bit more of an ease of expression here. But this is somebody I think that might actually be a little bit anxious and constantly needs to be doing something, because the mercurial signs of Virgo and Mercury are very active in the mind, but they're also very it's usually lots of nervous energy, bags of nervous energy. So late night thinkers, list makers. Mars in the 8th house for you, Sarah, could be that the house of emotional intelligence could be somebody that needs to delve deep and to understand the motivations of others, because perhaps you have friends who kind of trigger you in that way, or it could be family members that trigger you in that way, and it helps you to understand them a little bit better by exploring psychological texts, psychological ideas. But again, this could be somebody who's an explorer of the unknown and the mysteries, like astrology, and there's a need for this constant this Moon Mars challenge of needing to do your passions on a daily basis. You'd probably be good at going for a run as well. Like a bit of daily exercise for you is probably a really useful thing. Might help with the anxiety or the nervous energy that you may experience. So thank you to Sarah for that. And just another listener who has a lot of squares in the chart, Melanie V. You have got Venus and Jupiter at a square with each other. Now, if you remember back to the conjunction show, I was talking about the Venus and Jupiter opposition, and that I have the sextile. So that can be a bit of a sweet tooth and a little bit of an overindulgent combination. There is also, what did I also spot in your chart? Oh, a Saturn-Neptune square. So that can be a challenge between reality and dreaming, and, like kind of delving into, another one where boundaries are highlighted. It's like you want to be boundaried, you want to be able to... And this isn't feeding into personal plan. Oh, it is actually. It's feeding into personal planets for you, because you've got Neptune and Mars really tight conjunction, and also you've got Mercury there sitting slightly wide, but we can include it. I would allow that. It's ever so slightly wide at 21 degrees. So you've got 17, 18 and 21, and your Saturn is at 13 in Virgo. So yeah, there is a sense of perhaps unboundaried fun and adventurousness with your Neptune, Mars and Mercury triple conjunction or stellium in Sagittarius. And then you've got this Saturn in Virgo, which is a bit more reserved. So there could be this challenge of really, wanting, I don't know, I'm picking up a bit of self-doubt here. And, every time you have this idea to do something, whether it's you or it's somebody else, somebody will kind of dampen your adventurous spirit with practicalities and bringing you back down to earth. So you could be somebody who really feels the draw to going travelling, but for some reason or another there are things holding you back from doing that, and maybe it might be your friends who go, I don't think you should go travelling, did you not hear stories about that place, or did you not hear about that yoga school that the guy that was at the Bikram yoga, he was like a sexual predator and blah blah blah. So yeah, I feel like there's a sense of adventurousness which is constantly being held back and restricted by your Saturn. And maybe the way to work with that is to turn the adventurous exploration and a fun aspect of your Neptune, Mars and Mercury, and also this Venus-Jupiter square, by adding that Saturnian practicality and maybe turning it into a travel writing endeavour or travel blogging, something along those lines. Or perhaps, the friends that are the naysayers that constantly feed doubt into your mind, maybe just dampen. Or maybe they are actually helping you to stay grounded because, you know, maybe you do get a little bit carried away. I would say that somebody with a Venus-Jupiter square in the chart probably does struggle with getting a bit over the top sometimes. And maybe that Mars-Neptune-Mercury combination is somebody who has really wild ideas and does need to be anchored back down to earth a little bit sometimes. So possibly those friends are helping you to stop being so crazy. So yeah, I'd love to know if you guys are resonating with what I'm saying. And I have done, like I said a little while ago, I did an audit and I have been checking to see who I have or haven't mentioned on my episodes. So if I've missed you, I'm sorry, and I promise I'm going to catch up. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I am going to be picking winners out of the subscribers there. That's all you have to do is subscribe. And if you have a private YouTube page, it will be difficult for me to be able to see whether or not you have signed up, just send me a screenshot or just let me know that you've signed up to the YouTube channel by emailing me, stephanie@stelliumastrology.com. You can also submit your chart for me to have a look at and use as an example in one of these episodes by going to my website, stelliumastrology.com, and going to the mailing list, signing up, and there will be a form for you to complete that asks you all the questions I need to know about you. But yeah, anyway, it's been fun talking about the hard aspects. We've been doing the major hard aspects. And coming up next are a couple of shows. We'll be doing the soft aspects, the next one being the trine. Okay, you guys, take care. It's been fun. It's emotional. I'll speak to you soon.